Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to today's discussion where we're taking a look at the upcoming 3.20 Balance Manifesto on monster mods and Archnemesis stuff. By the way, if audio sounds better today, it's because I went out and got one of these, a Blue Yeti microphone. It sounds much better, at least in all of my testing. This is what it looks like right here. I am refraining from doing an unboxing video, but so far so good. It has been working very well. So with all of that wonderful, exciting news for us right here in the studio room aside, let's jump into the monster mods and Archnemesis info. So here's what we got today. In our upcoming 3.20 expansion, Archnemesis will be replaced with a system that is more similar to the way monster mods worked in the past. The issue that players often had with Archnemesis were the keyworded mod names were not fully descriptive of what they did. That sounds frustrating. The mods often had multiple effects bundled, which made them harder to understand. Guys, it's 2022. I don't know about you, but if anybody calls up my phone and says, hello, Mr. G3Iron, my name is such and such from so-and-so, and we'd like to invite you to bundle something. My immediate response is to say, no, thank you, have a great rest of your day, and then I generally move on with other conversations other than that one. Bundling is bad. I wonder who originally came up with the idea to bundle things. But other than like bundling sticks together to go make a fire outside, other than that sort of bundle, it's just bad. Like, hey, let's put a package together. And did you know that if you only pay us $5 more, we'll give you this other thing that you're totally never going to use, and the only thing it'll ever be used for is bad things? It's just bad. Anyway, so it sounds like that's at least one of the things that was going on with Archnemesis mods is that mods had multiple effects that were bundled, and that made them bad. Okay, so due to how many effects were included in a single mod, it made too many encounters too complex. Oh boy, that just reading that sentence makes me glad I haven't played for a year. Like, I don't want an encounter with a rare mod to be complex. That's what bosses are there for, right? Like, I guess in some frame of reference, when I interact with a rare mod, I might want to have to think about it a little bit. But part of the fun of POE, at least if you're playing softcore, I'm only speaking for myself here, so I can already hear some of the comments down below, some of you saying, oh, but Iron, I really like having all of these things in this. And that's fine. That's totally fine. If that's where you're at, more power to you. For me, when I play softcore, part of what's fun about playing Path of Exile, and I've done a video on this, shameless plug on that. I did a plug on an entire discussion video on this. Some of the fun of Path of Exile for me is that it's a power trip and that it is a journey of your character's progression. And so if I'm having to stop and think about monsters rather than thinking about my character, at least for me as a player, that's not a great thing. But that's just me. And so for all of you saying, oh, but Iron, what about me? That's great. I'm glad you've got your opinions. That's my opinion. I want to be thinking about, if anything, I want to be thinking about when I'm killing a monster, it's how is killing this monster helping improve my character, not thinking about the monster in and of themselves. That's a different perspective as a player from as a designer. As a designer, you want to be thinking about the encounter and the monster and what it does. But at least as a player, that's where my head is at. What does killing this monster bring to me? I don't want to be thinking about a complex encounter with a rare monster generally. Okay, next. The way Archnemesis rewards were set up meant that many players felt like they couldn't just kill a monster. They had to consider if they wanted to bring a magic find character in to maximize rewards. That sounds like, were there scenarios where basically you had to feel like you had to play in groups in order to get maximum rewards? Because that's kind of the way how maximum magic find works in Path of Exile. You get added bonus for party play, or at least you used to. Somebody's going to have to leave me a comment down below and let me know. Have they changed that? Have they updated that? Do we no longer get rewards from being in a party? Because until that changes, as long as you get more stuff for playing together with other players, then in general, Like, unless there's specific other mitigating circumstances, it's always going to be better to have a magic find character killing stuff while other players around are essentially bringing it down and supporting the magic find character. That's just intrinsic to the game. If you get more stuff from having more people in a party kill something, it sounds like Archnemesis rewards were set up in a way that amplified that, which in some regards plays into group play. Like, it sounds like maybe at some point, I don't even remember when Archnemesis was brought in because I haven't covered all these last couple of leagues, but if that was the original design intention, was to make it so that way you wanted to play with other players and they were trying to incentivize us as Path of Exile players to interact with each other and to play in groups, that sounds like one way that could be pretty feasible. Just make it more rewarding to play in groups, right? That sounds like something that they were trying to do, but that apparently is a problem. Okay, the goals of the new system. We got a new system coming, guys. New system. Everybody loves new systems. PS5, whatever Xbox they're calling the next thing. The Xbox Galaxy, the Xbox Cosmos. The Xbox, Microsoft, when they're naming their gaming platforms, they're a little bit like a car company. They just, they look on a thesaurus and they're like, okay, what's the word for sand? Let's find what that word is in a very ancient foreign dialect, and let's discover the anatomy of that word, and then we'll bring that word forward, and then we'll sell it as a car, and it's no longer the sand, it's the Sanagra. Like, anyway, that's Microsoft and Xbox. I'm getting off track here. The goals for the new system are: mods do one specific thing. Bro, that sounds like what we used to have back in the day. Back in my day. All right, mods say what they do rather than having a thematic name you must learn and remember. Oh! That sounds delightful. Imagine that. Mods that do what they say, or say what they do, rather than having a thematic name that says, like, the bone-crushing spirit analyzer. Like, what if we just said, like, returns damage to player? Like, it sounds less exciting than the bone-crushing spirit eater. It sounds less intriguing, but if you're a player and you're just walking up to something and you're like, hey, you know what? The only thing I need to worry about is guys that return damage to players. Reflect. Oh, okay, that one says reflect. I guess I better not shoot at that one. Encounters are simplified on average while retaining interesting fights. Ooh. Define this. I'm putting on my critical glasses here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to bring the glasses down a little bit. Could you define what an interesting fight is, and could you differentiate what an interesting fight is versus too many encounters that are too complex? What is the difference between an interesting fight? Drop me a comment down below. Maybe you guys will have an idea of how to parse this. What's the difference between these two things? Between an encounter that is too complex and an interesting fight. To me, an interesting fight in Path of Exile is when I kill something and it drops something awesome. or the thousands of times that it doesn't drop something awesome, but I feel like there's progress made to my character. Right, my character is growing. I'm getting experience. That's one monster that didn't drop anything, and so that's one less monster that's going to drop me nothing. And we're getting closer to the next monster that's going to drop me something. Right? So what's the difference between this? Between too many encounters that are too complex versus interesting fights. Like the Brine King. The Brine King, the first 100 times you fight him, okay, maybe the first 10 times you fight him, he's kind of an interesting fight. Right? But after that, eventually, as with any content in any game where you're repeating the content, eventually those fights aren't going to be interesting anymore. Think about Piety. Think about how many different times we fight Piety, right? Like, what is the difference between something that's too complex versus an interesting fight? I think once you've encountered something a couple of times, like, unless we're playing a Dark Souls game here, what might at first appear to be interesting is actually going to be just too complex. And as with all good things in Path of Exile, the answer is just more power creep. Like, get your character to a point where you don't have to worry about the things that are complex, because rather than being interesting, the thing that you're fighting is just dead. Right? That's Path of Exile. We've designed this really awesome encounter with this really cool thing. No, I blew it up in 1 second and I off-screen shot it because my character is overpowered, and I like that. A lot of people are in that spot. Especially if you play softcore. Like, we go to work, we go to school, we've got all sorts of different problems in life. We come home, we want to blow up monsters and feel awesome about it. Maybe not everybody's in that boat. right? So some of you out there right now are going, well, Iron, not all of us are in that boat, Iron. That's just like your opinion. And you're absolutely right. That is just my balding one man's opinion. But I think there's others out there. There's dozens of us. I think there's dozens of us out there like that. Okay. Players are no longer required to do annoying actions to maximize rewards. That is a sentence that I simply cannot believe, because I feel like Path of Exile. I feel like one way to describe Path of Exile is a layered and tiered system of annoying things to do, which then maximize your rewards. And things that are generally more fun, fun is a subjective term, but things that are generally more enjoyable to you are not necessarily the things that maximize your rewards. Right? There are some of us in the community that really do like min-maxing rewards, and so doing all of the quote-unquote annoying things is very enjoyable for some. But for a lot of us, think back to sextant farming. A lot of us didn't spam sextants and re-rolling sextants back in the day. We didn't do that in endgame mapping. A lot of us didn't do that because we just wanted to plug in a map, run, and go. Right? We didn't want to spend time maximizing the rewards. Some players did like doing that and really made tons and tons of currency off of that approach. That's okay. Both of those approaches are fine. I'm just skeptical of this sentence as a goal of a new system is for players to no longer be required to do annoying actions to maximize rewards. Like, it's kind of Path of Exile at its core is, hey, we've gated some of the most rewarding things behind annoying stuff, so that way not everybody's just doing it. Okay, let's examine these goals individually. Mods to do one specific thing. Here's an example. The Magma Barrier Archnemesis mod did a whole lot of stuff. It started by putting a magma barrier around the monster, but it didn't stop there. It converted some of the monster's physical damage to fire damage. It added some extra fire damage on top. It granted fire resistance to the monster, and it gave some physical damage reduction for good measure. It also spawned volatile flame bloods to follow you. Oh, that sounds awful. The new equivalent modifier just puts a magma barrier around the monster and does nothing else. Okay, so if you call it now Magma Barrier, you mean it's not going to be Magma Barrier and Flame Bloods and additional resistances? Like, it sounds like they tried to take, 6 mods that would have been on a rare mod before and combine it into one and then say, look, guys, we made it so that way it's more challenging. I mean, that is one way to stack more mods. Mods say what they do rather than having a thematic theme or a themed name that you must learn and remember. For example, rather than Incendiary, which broke down into 6 properties. Wow! That's a lot! You now see monsters with either ignites or fire and ignite resistant. You mean like what we used to do? Instead of Deadeye, which did 5 separate things, you'd now see applies random mark, extra crits, or accurate as separate unrelated mods. This is a classic example of create your own problem and then fix it by doing the thing that was originally there before the problem, and you look like a hero. That's maybe it's more complex than that. Maybe I'm being too cynical, too skeptical. I'm being too something today. I'm being too bold today. All right, encounters are simplified on average while retaining interesting fights. The pool of mods that involve complex interaction like spawning volatiles or ground effects on death have been heavily diluted by the presence of the simpler mods. This means that you encounter more complex fights less frequently, but interesting and challenging emergent behavior from overlapping mods can still happen, just less often. Okay, so what we should hear when we read the phrase "retain interesting fights" is we should hear this stuff doesn't happen as often. That's what we should hear. We hear, hey, the things that were frustrating you before, hopefully they don't happen as much. That's what we should hear there. Okay, players are no longer required to do annoying actions to maximize rewards. In Archnemesis, rewards were associated with individual mods. This meant that you could tell what kind of rewards you would get in advance. In some cases, you were then effectively required to fetch a magic find culling character to make sure that you maximize the value of the monster mod that you had found. Oh, okay. So the way how they're phrasing this problem is scenario. You see a monster that's going to give you a massive loot drop. So then you log your character. You open a portal. You log your character. You go onto your magic find character. That that I'm somewhat sympathetic to, both from a design perspective and from a player's perspective. Yet it wasn't that long ago, was it? Was it the Metamorph League? Was 3.9 the Metamorph League? Somebody correct me down in the comments. I can already hear you guys screeching. It was actually 3 something else. But maybe it was 3.9. If 3.9 was Metamorph, remember when Metamorph happened and we said, oh, you can make these really cool, awesome bosses? And one of the solutions that we came up with as a community, at least early on in the Metamorph League, was, oh my gosh, there's an unkillable Metamorph that I've got. And people would build single target DPS builds or whatever. They would build specific, hey, I'm just a Metamorph killing machine, right? And that was different from a regular mapper, from a speed mapper, or from a bosser. It was some sort of hybrid, I guess, what we might say, between a bosser versus a speed map clear. And I don't know, that just brings that whole phrase to mind, right? That whole, hey, I found such and such, and I need somebody to come kill it for me. That reintroduces or re-exposes that sort of gameplay. And that seems like something that they were trying to move away from as we came out of 3.9, but my memory could be failing me on this like it is in so many other cases. All right. So in other cases, you would ignore a monster completely if you knew that it would only drop rewards that were of no value to you. In the new system, we have added a significant pool of new rewards to rares. Okay, so that just means that crafting got a lot harder, right? There's a new pool. Or maybe that's not affixes. We have added a significant pool of new rewards to rares. Okay, so that's rare monsters, not rare items. My reading comprehension. Sorry, folks, I haven't read POE language in a year. It's going to take me a while to get back into reading POE mode. So we're talking about rares, right? Because we're talking about Archnemesis. We're talking about rare monsters, not rare drops. So we've added a significant pool of new rewards to rare monsters, as it were. But the reward that is on the monster is hidden and not associated with a specific mod. Oh, just wait until somebody data mines that. So you don't know what kind of rewards you will get until you kill the monster. So in other words, they're trying to make it so kill every monster, don't just wander around and skip monsters. Rare monsters with more mods are more likely to have these special hidden reward mods. This new reward system smooths out the spikiness that the Archnemesis reward system had. Okay. All right, that's it. It is annoying to drop a portal and switch characters. I agree with that. That is an annoying behavior. I originally read that and thought we were targeting group player behavior and Magic Find. Sounds like we're not targeting that. Sounds like we're targeting the, hey, switch your character sort of stuff. So Magic Find is still alive. Group play is still alive. It's still better to do annoying things to maximize your rewards. It's just, as it relates to Archnemesis monsters, hopefully you won't have to log out in order to do that. Okay. So maybe a resurrection of the Magic Find meta, since now we don't know if every monster could be a loot explosion, right? Just kill everything with Magic Find, which is always, by the way, the solution in PoE. Just always kill everything with Magic Find. All right, conclusion. Here we go. The original motivation for developing Archnemesis, oh, tell me, I didn't play it, was that the previous monster mod system was very out of date. Okay, that's fair. Many of the mods didn't have any appreciable effect under modern balance, and there wasn't a lot of interesting gameplay possible. I think that's fair. From a design perspective, look, it's Grinding Gear Games' game, and so if they want to take the game in a certain way, ultimately that's up to them. We all buy into it whenever we buy packs and support the game, but that's fair. If game designers are getting bored and are saying, look, we don't feel like our gameplay is interesting, then that is a serious problem, both from a designer side of things and from a player side of things. Players start dropping off if they don't have fun. In our opinion, Archnemesis did succeed at adding a lot of interesting new mechanics to rares, but introduced the problems described above. While creating the new monster mods described in this article, we were careful to retain most of the interesting mechanics that Archnemesis introduced, but in a way that doesn't include a grab bag of other effects and is diluted by many other simpler mods. The result is a system that is very similar to what monster mods used to be like, but with much more up-to-date content and balance. Mods are simpler and say exactly what they do. Hey, I like that. While you can certainly still rarely encounter scary combinations of mods that really wake you up, it's a lot rarer than it was under the Archnemesis system. We feel that the new system is more modern and interesting than the old Monster Mod Nemesis system, and is clearer and easier to understand in the heat of combat than Archnemesis was. Posted by Grinding Gear Games community team. Okay, so that's the 320 balance manifesto on hodgepodge, grab bag, all sorts of smorgasbord, miscellaneous. Anyway, my thesaurus brain is jumping around. Monster Mods and Archnemesis. Okay, so I actually have a surprising few amount of thoughts here at the end of our discussion. I'd love to hear from y'all. I simply haven't played with the Archnemesis mod, so let me know what down below in the comments, what was frustrating to play with this. I can imagine it based off of what I'm reading. It sounds like it was probably a pretty frustrating mechanic to interact with, especially if you're like trying to read something. If you do take the time to read a rare mod, you should be rewarded for that in some way. Right? If you take the time, if your build doesn't just instantly blow things up and you can actually read what's on the monster, and from a design perspective, if you actually want players to read what's on your monster, then unless you're going for some sort of hidden Easter egg sort of feel to it, like, oh, you don't recognize this thing, you're just adding additional layers of learning onto a game that already has thousands of layers of learning incorporated into it. So maybe from a design and a marketing standpoint, they're going, hey, look, this is just another thing like what we do with everything else, which is make complicated things more complicated. But sometimes we PoE players, the reason why we use all these third-party tools, and the reason why we use all of the different spreadsheets that we use and we rely on each other for information and go to each other for build guides and ideas, is because there's a lot of complex things in the game, and playing the game with that somewhat hidden knowledge exposed actually makes the game more enjoyable. It's not just that it makes it easier, but it makes the game more enjoyable. And so maybe the team at Grinding Gear Games is saying, you know what? That was, we tried it. We were hoping that it would stick, but it didn't necessarily stick by renaming things and making it more difficult to know what you're up against. And so I'm in favor of that. And as always, I'm always in favor of game companies coming out, trying new things, and then going, hey, you know what? We tried it. It didn't work. And so let's pivot. Let's pivot and see if our new solution will work. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts. I'd love to read your thoughts down below in the comments. Thanks so much to everybody who's made it a joyful and a welcome thing for me to be back here on YouTube posting videos. And eventually, hopefully next week, when Delirium is everywhere, I will get over on Twitch and be streaming some gameplay and get my wrist and fingers and everything going again on the computer for playing some PoE. It's going to be fun to be back in the action. But thanks so much to everybody who's made it such a welcome thing for me to be back. Hopefully the audio sounds better today, but feel free to leave me a comment about that. And I hope that the upcoming 3.20 league, whatever the heck it's going to be named, didn't we call it the Sarcasm League? Anyway, whatever 320 is going to be, I hope that the upcoming 320 league is the league that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.